Probably to the cloud. Okay, I'm recording.
Alrighty. So actually very excited. Very excited. I've been working on this for a while. This is actually going to be the first episode of the Struggling Artist series. In case you didn't know, in case you weren't informed, it's the one and only Untitled Flow. That's UNTITLED Flow. You're gonna be hearing that a lot, so it's best to get used to it. Before we get started, I'm gonna give a brief introduction, not go too deep into what the story of the struggling artist is and the ideas behind that. But you'll kind of see more of it as we progress through the show and the talks and everything. So the goal and the main goal behind the story of the struggling artist is mostly to focus on the journey of our artist, to talk about what it takes to be an artist and that journey to the masterpiece. You hear a lot of artists today or successful people today talk about how their journey to success and how they make their impact on the world, but little is talked about the steps to take to that. So that's the goal of the story of the struggling artist, to try to highlight those stories to inspire others to create and then create something to inspire others. So that actually perfectly segues into what we're going to be talking today. We're going to be talking about the importance of finding your why. Why is that important? Your foundation, starting with who are you? And I am lucky today to have with me Joel Van Kuiken. He's actually the co-founder of the Delta Project. He's a design thinker, communications and public relations professional. And also he's a part-time life coach, hosts a lot of different sessions. Actually, he hosts a session talking about finding your why, a great seminar that I attended. And I was lucky enough to have him start my first episode today. So thank you, Joe, for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, Malik. I'm excited.
Alrighty. Would you like to, before we start, let's talk about the Delta Project a little bit. Let's talk
Sure.
about the Delta Project a little bit.
Yeah. So the Delta Project is it's a 501c3 nonprofit. It was actually formed back in 2017. It's a partnership between myself and Cole Williams and a third partner, Eric Johnson. Cole Williams is a fatherhood, an expert on fatherhood. He works in the juvenile detention center here in Kent County, Michigan, and has uh, teaches there every Friday. And he's a real advocate for understanding the role that Black and Brown fathers play in our lives. Um, One day in his class that he taught on a Friday afternoon, he was talking about all of the men that he sees, the Black and brown men in our community that are doing great things and that he sees on a regular basis. He was sharing that information and stories with the students in the detention center. One of the students raised his hand and he said, "You know, that's great that you see that, Mr. Cole. Um, but in my neighborhood, you know, I don't see things like that. And I don't see these men. And how am I supposed to become something I don't see?" So that question, how do you become something you don't see, stuck with Cole. And really kind of, he was at a loss for words when he heard it. Um, Later that year in 2017, he actually reached out to me and posed the scenario and the question to me. And I had just finished working on a degree in design thinking, and I felt like it was like the perfect combination of the perfect timing for that question to be asked of me. I was primed to receive that question. Um, Ultimately, what I did, I realized that this was a movement, this was a big deal. And I invited one of my friends and partners, Eric Johnson, into the discussion to talk about how we might approach this. And ultimately, what we ended up doing was going into the juvenile detention center, bringing in production equipment, teaching the students production on a Friday afternoon, from lighting to audio, set design for what that's worth, behind the scenes footage, all the different positions. And we also decided which of the students would act as an interviewer. A week later, we brought in a person from the community, a person of color, that these kids wouldn't see. and we sat them down across from each other and they had a conversation and we captured that conversation. But we did it in a special way with two cameras and a box with mirrors in it. So that just as we're sitting across from each other now in this Zoom call, it was really kind of the same thing. This was before Zoom was really, part of the zeitgeist now. Um, and we created a split screen video that captured these conversations. And we did 5 episodes of that. And that was really the foundation of the storytelling. We've grown from that. And with COVID, of course, we had to pivot and kind of do things differently. We've become really focused on helping young men who are returning from the juvenile detention center and who are on probation, helping them find the resources and the support and the mentorship that they need in their community to avoid recidivizing and to find the path that they're really meant to be on. So that's the Delta Project in a nutshell. There are many layers to it, but a little bit of background on that work.
Yeah, so taking that, the power of perception, how we see things, and kind of utilizing just that concept, and the labeling theory as well, using those two concepts to emphasizing those concepts in your work. I see a lot of that, trying to change their perception to see the things that they need to see, so they're more likely to chase after that thing that they want. And stripping away and telling their story also strips away those labels that may or may not be given to them by their peers or family or by society, or just because they're in that juvenile detention center. It's based, and I think that's what's so important about storytelling, honestly, is that it gives you a chance to tell your story, your narrative, from your perception, because everybody has a different story. Everybody has different struggles. When a person first becomes successful, that's when you hear them talk about, I had to do this, I had to work so hard, I had to do this, I had to do that. You hear them kind of briefly mention it, but then it kind of goes back into, but most of the time, they'll describe where they came from, and then they talk about how it's better now, that point A to point B.
Right.
There's no This actually goes into one of my first questions, actually. It goes into point A and point B. You never really see anything in between. Now, this may be worded a little weird, 'cause I'm still working on this question, Joel, but it was, what is the letter between A and B? Because when we
Mm,
talk about progress, when we talk about success, it's always, this is where I was, and now this is where I am. And I had to work hard. They don't give specific details on what they had to work hard on or anything like that. What would you think that letter between A
mhm.
from, what's that, the space, the gap between point A and point B?
So that's really insightful. And when I saw that question, I was a little perplexed by it, but now I see where you're coming from. Um, but you know, I don't think there is a letter in there. There's a certain amount of mystery, and I think in a way we're prisoners of the present. When we're going through that, we may not realize we're on the journey from point A to point B. We're always at a certain point in the present moment. And it's only when we start reflecting back on it that we see that we started somewhere and ended up somewhere. So it's a very ambiguous thing. That letter is undefinable in my mind. We can only talk about the here and now. So, um, yeah, I just think, we're a constant work in progress. That question, how do I become something I don't see? That's for all of us to answer. Not just a young man in juvenile detention trying to figure out what his future may look like, but we all can reflect on that question and think about, yeah, what can I become? How do I become the thing that I not necessarily meant to be, but what feels natural to me? And I think some people will arrive there, some people might not. But the goal is to help them get to that point that we're like, yeah, this is who I was meant to be. It took me many years to get to that point. But when I got there, it's like I knew it. And it was a very tangible feeling that, okay, I've gone through all of these periods of my life and I've reached this point where, okay, I established myself in my own mind and I'm good. This is who I am. And I hope everyone can figure that out.
Let me take it back a few steps because what I love your response when you were talking about that letter between A and B being undefined because you just the way you explained everything after that was perfect about how can we be something that we can't see, and I think that's what gives a lot of people fear when it comes to starting something that they're very passionate about because they can't see it, and that path from point A to point B is so undefined.
Right. And
And
I
I
think,
think, oh,
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it's just I think our fear is wasting our time or not knowing if it's gonna work or not. So that point, that letter of it being undefined, I think that's the perfect answer to it because we all, like you said, it takes people, some people years, it takes some people a quick amount of time. For everybody, that space in between is always, it's never a straight line. It's
Yeah.
never a straight line. It's always different. So
And I think, trying to define a letter between A and B is a natural reaction in our culture. We want something reliable. We want a bottom line. What is that letter? Well, you know, that's kind of, in my mind, the opposite of how you should be thinking about it. It is an infinite amount of letters. There are an infinite amount of variables in that space that we need to be open to and that we need to test. And it's by testing those different variables and really exploring our creativity that things will begin to crystallize. And things that are meant to work will work, and things that aren't meant to work will fall away. But ultimately, you can reach that point where you're on this continuum between reliability and validity, and you have the bottom line things in your lives that we need in order for us to be effective, but we aren't so slavishly devoted to efficiency that we eliminate any of the creativity that we need in our lives to truly be innovative and to move the ball down the court and to be more effective human beings.
So when it comes to finding that bottom line, how do you think social comparison or comparing ourselves to others or people that have made it, or just that societal norm of this, just how we're supposed to make it in life, graduate 24, so you graduate high school at 18, get
Yep.
done with college 2020, 22, 25, you get married by 30. So how does that, all those norms and social comparison play into our own journey? Like you said, like finding that bottom line. There's an infinite amount of letters, but for some reason we only seem to focus on like a couple or what somebody else did, the ones that somebody else used.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I think, you know, there are multiple bottom lines, and maybe that's the way to think about it. Um, and ultimately, I don't want to think of my life as a bottom line, right? I mean, I want to think of my life as more uh, variable, invariant than that. That there are lots of paths and opportunities, and it's like a menu, and I can choose what I want to validate within that menu and build a future. If I'm stuck on one thing, I might become brilliant at that one thing, but I'll have so many blind spots that I won't be effective. So I think it's about finding a balance and being open to all the possibilities that present themselves, and also having kind of an opposable mind where you can hold a variety of different ideas in your mind at one time. That you're not just stuck on one thing and so focused on that that everything else becomes inconsequential. It's all important. We all have a certain lens that we see things, but that's our lens, and we're never going to be objective about ourselves. We're going to have a subjective view of ourselves, and it comes from how we perceive others. We start comparing ourselves to others on social media, in our lives. I feel, I don't measure up. I've got imposter syndrome. I've got something that's telling me I'm not where I need to be. When the fact is, you're right where you need to be, and you're on your own personal journey. and you can kind of measure it against others, but you're doing yourself a disservice ultimately when you do that. You have to find ways to understand your own path. And I think you do that through other people, by the relationships that you build, the connections that you make, the network that you build, the people that you impact is really going to help define you more than one single thing.
Exactly. And I think taking it back to where you said that balance point about how it's a balance to sometimes we can easily tip over to one thing. Either it's and sometimes like you said with like ourselves and other people. That yes, we grow, we have our own and we shouldn't compare ourselves to everybody else. We also need those people to kind of maybe change or modify our perspective a little bit, maybe offer a piece of evidence that we don't have. So when it comes to balance, to me, I always envision a very strong foundation that you have to have something strong that you stand on. And it may not, and that may change over time. You know, uh, how do I say this? Simon Sinek had this great analogy that he used. When it comes to building your foundation, it's like a house. Your why, and we'll go into that question, why is that important later, but he said your why is like the foundation for the house. And what and how and everything else that you're doing is the house. Now, mind you, the house will always change. The rooms can always change. So your what you're doing and how you're doing it will always change. But the reason why you're doing never will, because that's what everything else is built on. So, like
Yeah.
you were saying, we have our own values. Like me, I'm an artist. I believe in creativity. I believe in creativity, and I believe in inspiring others. That's the reason why I do what I do. But how I'm doing it, and the method that I chose to do has always changed. At first, I thought it was through writing and through music, and now I'm doing this, and then later it's a combination of all those things together. Who knows? Later down the road, it may be something different, but it's always why. So I think when it comes to that, it leads right into the next question that I have. Why is it so? Is that why it's important to find our own why, or what is the importance of finding our why?
Yeah, so you really understand it deeply, Malik. I mean, I'm impressed with how you just described it to me. It's about this golden circle with really that why in the middle, the how, and the what. You know, it looks like a target with that why in the bullseye. And it doesn't mean that why is more important than how or what. It's just that you start with it. So when you can figure out what your why is, the how and the what gain clarity because you're doing those things in support of your why. So it's a fairly simple concept in that sense once you get your head around it. Um, and it's kind of, it's almost like I don't want to call it a mental model, but it's a way to kind of make choices and live your life. And the why statement is created through storytelling and actually partnering up with someone, telling each other stories, and then your other person who is objective about your story can start to articulate what your why might be. And it's basically framed as to something so that outcome. There's a very straightforward kind of heuristic and model to understand what that statement looks like. So it's a methodical way to create it, but it's also very qualitative and you can go very deep. But it really helps you, you know, get to that point where um, you can move forward in your life with more meaning. This is my why here to translate concepts into semi autonomous systems so that others can benefit, grow, and have greater social impact. Now, I share that because when I figured out my why about a year ago, I realized that this is what I was doing all my life. Um, I didn't have a way to articulate the way that I moved in the world, but I was operating under that auspice, under that why statement without even realizing it. And that was kind of an enlightening moment to see that. and it's helped me better understand, what I want to focus my efforts on and what's important to me in life. So yeah, I mean, Simon Sinek is kind of everywhere now. Everyone's kind of talking about him. Um, I don't want to say it's becoming cliche, but this is one way to gain more clarity in your life. It's not the only way, but it's one way to do it. And I find it to be quite effective. Um, but you need to commit to it, find it, hone it, own it, put it on your wall, and live with it. And constantly, think about it. I think about it each day. So I mean, it's not like you have to find your why to have a meaningful life, but it's one tool that might bring more meaning into your life. Um, I had some really good advice when I was in college. One of my professors told me, he said to me, try to live outside of the country, overseas, for, for 6 months or more. And then he also said, probably by the time you're 35 to 40, that's when you should start to really zero in on what your vocation is and your true work life. And I don't think he realized how meaningful those words were to me at the time. Because when you're in college or when you're a teenager, everything's in front of you in a sense. You've got all this stuff coming, and it's easy to feel, I don't want to say overwhelmed, but it's hard to envision what you're going to
Everything
be
in
like.
front of you.
Yeah. I
Kind of
mean, what
everything
you're
in
going to be
front of
like
you.
in 20 years.
And that was my question. That was actually one of my questions. Because like you said, it's starting to catch on. We've seen a lot of businesses that take on this model, Apple, Nike, and all that. And you gave a great example of how we can apply that individually by basically reflecting on our life, communicating and sharing with others. Now, to play devil's advocate just a tad bit,
Oh, yeah.
um, that was like your why statement. I love that. I want to read mine as well. But it's also just focusing on how do we make sure we don't, like you said, with the blind spots, when we focus on just one sole thing, we can miss all the other things around us. So how do we make sure we
Hmm.
don't lock too much to that definition? Like, let's say you found that why statement, that's a great why statement, but how do we make sure that we can still grow with that why statement? Like, I don't want it, like, how do we say, you don't want that to define? How do we make sure that the why statement doesn't completely define us?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's probably the how and the what that you need to bring into consideration. Maybe it's not the why statement when it's all said and done that is defining you. It's how you implement your why. Maybe it's the how and the what. Like the Delta Project is a how and a what for me. You
Yeah,
know, it helps me um, understand my why doing that work.
that's just one lens. That's just one perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, it kind of it's an interesting thing to think about, and I'm not sure I have a really good answer for you, but my sense is that it goes back to that reliability and validity thing, this efficiency versus effectiveness, creativity, bottom line thinking. If we look at our why statement as a bottom line statement, we're probably going to feel pretty boxed in by it. But if we look at it in a more expansive way and we see it as the whole golden circle, um, then it's going to become an opportunity. So I don't know if that answers it or not, but I think it's how you interpret it, and how you're open to accepting it.
Okay.
It's not
Okay.
like, oh, I figured it out, I'm done. No, you're always beginning. Even when you feel like you've arrived, you're always beginning again. You're doing something more. There's no, data can't tell you the future. It can only tell you the past. I mean, you can use data to try to understand the future, but the future is the future, and we just don't know.
Yeah. The podcast, there was a podcast that you sent me. It was prepare for this. It was called by Seth Godin,
Oh
and
yeah, he has a
he used the
knowledge
quote.
project.
Yeah, and he used the quote from somebody I can't remember at the time, but he said, "Find out who you are and do it on purpose." But he was like, "Hold on." He said, "Hold on. Let me try to flip that for you guys, because the thing is that if you spend all your time trying to find out who you are and then go do it, you're asking for immediate gratification. You're asking for all these things that aren't tangible before you start to do something." So he told us, so he told in the podcast, he was talking about, let's flip that to do it on purpose, and then you'll find out who you are. And I think, like you said, and I think that's why how we don't like walk into our why statement. For mine, for example, when I joined your seminar last year, it was talking about mine was to act with persistence, creativity, and humility so people can come together. So people can come together and share inspiration. So to act with persistence, creativity, humility so people can come together and share inspiration.
Okay.
So when I heard that, like you said, I heard that and I was kind of like, that makes perfect sense, because that's what I've been doing all my life. Little did I know, and I was able to pick piece and piece and piece from that, piece from that. But it was also saying, okay, if I'm going to inspire people with creativity, at first it was kind of like, all right, then I need to focus on the art, focus on the art. But as I started, like you said, as you start continuing to go into it, you meet other people that throw in different ideas, and you realize, okay, maybe, and I started to realize maybe it's bigger than that art and acting humble. Maybe it's a little bit bigger than that. How can we involve people, not artists, but people?
Yeah.
So sometimes it was focusing on different parts, but seeing it all together and still growing from it. So I think that's the most important, is taking it, is using your why statement as a stepping stone, not as the core, not to be your core. Like I know the golden circle is
Hmm.
that's a great analogy, but I would kind of flip it the other way. I would say I would look at it as a staircase.
Oh yeah.
A staircase going up. First you have your why statement, and then that's kind of just how you kind of get started. You kind of walk up the stairs, you're getting started. You're not tired yet, but you're just getting started. And then as you go up, you start to sightsee and everything, and then you kind of see, okay, I'm halfway there. Then that's when the what and the how comes together. And by the time you get on the top of the mountain, it's all clear. But you started taking those steps with the why statement. It wasn't the why statement that got you to the stairs can't take the steps for you. You have to take the
Right.
steps to the why statement. So I
Right.
will look at it, I will look at the golden circle a little bit like a staircase, just for me, to make sure that we don't focus too much on that why. Not to disrespect Simon Sinek or any of his
Oh, I
ideas,
hear you.
but at the same, I think that's how we have to do movement, because with immediate gratification being so heavy right now, and
Yep.
social comparison as well, progress, movement, taking risk is the models and things that we should be emphasizing, especially when it comes to self growth, and self improvement.
Yeah. That's interesting about the staircase because it's like, are you climbing the stairs or are the stairs coming down to you?
Exactly.
I mean, it's like two things going on in there. But I would say there is no top of the mountain. You're going to get there, and there's more. There's always more.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's the
Maybe there's a
one.
view, there's a view behind the mountain or something.
Yeah, I mean, I just think
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think how that metaphor holds up, and I just feel like everyone is like, "Oh, I want to get to the top of the mountain." Well, you know, that's within you. It's not at the top of the mountain.
Exactly.
And getting there, there is no getting there. Once you're there, if you're truly there, there's always more. It doesn't just stop. So I mean, it's kind of getting your head around that as well. That you know, um, it's just a continuum that we're on, and hopefully it's regenerative. And you know that we how we impact others makes our essence live on. Is kind of how I like to think about it. But it's open to interpretation, right? I mean,
Yeah, I definitely believe that, because it's kind of like we said in the beginning with the point A to point B. I mean, it's kind of those infinite, undefined letters.
yeah,
However, um, there's this, the old saying that you learn in kindergarten, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. You
Oh,
know,
I know that one. Yeah.
yeah, that one. It's kind of like looking into that, and it's kind of like, same thing with the what we were talking about with the why statement. In kindergarten, you're taught like, this is what you're being given, the toys and everything.
Mhm.
You have to appreciate what you have and just, that's it. And but for me, but if we take that and we grow it up and we grow up with this kind of mindset, it's kind of settling. It's kind of this
Yeah.
settling mindset that's kind of like, okay, this is what I've been given, whether I like it or not, this is what I have.
Yep.
I have a saying, but I kind of flip that, and I believe it should be you should work with what you got until you can get into a better spot.
I like that.
Because when we're talking about getting to point A to point B, it's never, like you said, because that role, there's so much ambivalence, and because it's so undefined, sometimes you gotta, and then like you said, with the with the hindsight and reflection, when you were talking about with your when we're growing up and we see our why, you see how those things at the time when it didn't make any sense on how this is going to go into your ultimate goal,
Yeah.
somehow, some way it fed into that, or it gave you a whole different perspective that changed your idea to make it even better.
Yeah.
I don't think so. If we keep this mindset, if you get what you get and don't throw a fit, then we're gonna be sitting here kind of like, how, like upset, like, man, if only I had this. I keep thinking
Right.
I need this, but everything I need could be right in front of me.
Yep.
And
And
I
you might
think
not
that's,
see it.
yeah, and
How do I
that's what
become something I don't see? Right. It
exactly.
goes to that. And
Sometimes
it's
we have to, oh,
yeah,
sorry.
it's bottom line thinking. No, go ahead. I'm just trying to echo what you're saying because I totally agree with you. 100%.
Yeah, and that's what really fuels. I think that saying right there fuels the creativity and innovative thinking that we were talking about. Because if we look at all the greats, although all the greats, they had to take a risk. They had to work with the little stuff that they had.
Yep.
The best resources. One of my flaws is that especially with setting this up, I wanted the whole nice setup. With the chairs in the background where we're talking face to face and everything, and the camera, a professional setup. But I don't have that right now. And I wanted that to be a good quality, but working to try to get that quality and never starting, I would have started the show. I would have never talked
Yep.
about it. So with working with what I got to get to that point where I can have the nice room, the nice talk room and everything there with the background screen and everything showing off everything, the logo and everything. But like we said, with using that why statement as a staircase, that first step, you're like, I got 900, I got so many more steps ahead. But with that why statement and working with what we got and using the why statement as a staircase instead of using it as our core, we can start to realize that it's a progress, that it's a process, and there's
Yeah.
progress. And we see the progress. And the
Yep.
more we focus on and when we focus more on our progress instead of the end result, that's
Yeah.
where our why statements becomes the most effective.
Yeah.
That's when our narrative and our story becomes more effective. Because if people focus on the end result more than the progress, when they get to the end result, it may not be all that they want to be. And then when someone asks them, "Hey, what did you do to make it?" They can't really tell that other
Yeah.
person. They can't explain to that other person how they made it. They'll probably just summarize it in the best way, like we said before. I had to just work really hard. I was working 2 jobs and I went to school and did this, this, this. But they don't tell you, I had to take these self-care routines to make sure I was taking care of myself because everybody want to work like machines, but machines need maintenance too. They don't tell about how we had to eat right or get the right amount of sleep or how they had to connect with these different people to get to where they are now. They don't all of these details that bring flavor into their process is completely taken out. So I know that was a weird way to say it, but
Oh, that's good. I would
it
say,
makes it seem like a bland piece of bread that we're giving everybody. Here's what you need to do. This right here, just in general, work hard and you'll get there.
right. It's
But
it's
everybody,
it's a fallacy. I mean, it's just much more complicated than that, and it's beautifully complex. I mean, it's just there's nuance. There's all sorts of things going on, and things that we just need to embrace. This ambiguity, these things in life that are mysterious. Embracing that just opens up more opportunity and more doors. But I think at a certain point in your life, you know, you know, any point in your life, you got to have a plan, right? I mean,
Exactly.
have a 3 to 5 year plan and work the plan. When you're in your 20s, if you start thinking, okay, I'm going to chunk things out into a 3 to 5 year plan, you set some goals for that period, you work toward it, you might reach those goals, and you reassess. You say, okay, I'm going to make another 3 to 5 year plan. I started doing that when I was younger. Um, it was hard to kind of visualize and understand. But as I got older and I saw myself working these plans, things started to fall into shape, into place. And there was a method to my movement into where I was headed. So it was a good kind of model to follow to achieve what I wanted to achieve and to become what I wanted to become.
And I'm glad that you brought that up because that's something that I've been working on. I started what I call like a little glow up plan, and that's something I'll explain later, y'all. Later down. But yeah, just locked up all of my goals and everything. And through research, I found that it takes 21 days to build a habit, and once that habit's in, it's really hard to break that habit. So if you're, and I think that's what made me appreciate, like you said, that process so much more, and to know that with plans, not to that it's important to make a plan, but you don't live by the plan lives by you. You have to grow.
There
The
you go.
plan has to grow and adapt because of the ambiguity, because of the ambivalence between that point A to point B, between the like you were saying, just and as time goes on, some of those patterns will start to form. Checking your to-do list or making sure you do what you need to do to make sure those plans are effective. And
Mm-hmm.
then and that's the importance when we're coming towards, I think what I wanted to ask you next was, that sounds good and all, but what if I don't know where to start? What if I'm already what if I'm, a teenager, nowhere near my 20s? Where do I start? What if I'm past my 20s? I'm in my 30s or 40s, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Mm-hmm.
it too late for me to start?
Well, I mean, that's kind of an existential question because you've already started. Even if you feel like you haven't started, you always have a choice. Even if you choose not to make a choice, that's a choice. So you just gotta let this existential idea empower you to make choices, and choices that are going to lead you down a path. It's never too late. It's never too early. It's just right now. There's now and there's tomorrow. The past is the past. Everyone's going to have their own interpretation of history. There is really no history when you think about it that way, because it's all how we perceive. Everyone is going to perceive something that happened differently. And the people that write the books can only write from their perspective. So to get hung up on, oh, it's too late for me, or I don't know how to start. Well, if you get caught in that mindset, you're back into that bottom line thinking that there's got to be one way to do this, when there's not. There are multiple ways, and that's the beauty of it. It's kind of an infinite feeling. Once you realize that, you need the fuel, right? I mean, you got to be at a certain point on the hierarchy of needs. You've got to have food, clothing, and shelter. You've got to be in a position where you can make choices. But once you're in that position, um, and once you've reached, and as things grow, you can kind of do whatever you want to do. The only thing, it sounds trite again, but the only thing stopping me was myself, until I figured out, it just dawned on me that if I want to do something, I'm going to do it. And I'll try it out. I'm going to prototype it. If I have an idea, I'm going to try and see and explore, talk to people, network. And then things happen. And before you know it, you're not thinking about the fact that you're stuck or you don't know where to start. You're already on your path and you didn't even realize it. And all of a sudden, there you are. And one day you're like, hey, I'm on this journey. I see it now. It'll just come to you. But if you just dwell on this idea that it's too late for me. I don't know where to start. Um, if you put that at the forefront of your mind, then yeah, you're going to be stuck there. But if you let go of that and just, like you say, untitled flow, let that flow happen, let it go, move with it, jump in, do your thing, meet people, talk. I mean, I'm an introverted guy. I need my time alone. Um, but, you know, um, I love connecting with people and sharing ideas, even though I consider myself an introvert.
I like how you were saying sometimes we just need to jump in or go with the flow, shout out Untitled Flow. But with that, there's a lot of risk. I think a lot of people, when I talk, most of the time when I talk to people, I feel like you can relate to this as well, or anybody listening. When most people have an idea or something that they do or something that they're passionate about, the number one thing I hear is, I don't have the time,
Yeah.
or I have this instead of this, so I don't have the time. But
Yeah.
that's the number one excuse that I hear. And I think the thing is that is well, I feel like we do have the time, because if you want to make something for the time, that's easier said than done. I don't want to summarize or not downplay anybody's situation, but at the same time, I think when people say they don't have the time, I think it's more of not that they don't have the time to put into it, they don't have time to waste. They're scared of that risk of wasting that time.
Well,
And I think, why are we? And I think to myself, I had a conversation with my aunt. She was telling me about how to let things come to me, and she said they said something that really spoke to me. It was how why are we so afraid to let time be our teacher?
yeah, that's a good one.
Why are we so afraid to let time and experience be our teacher? Does
Yeah.
that go back to the social comparison where we have to hit those check marks, graduate by this age, married by this age, whether that's our older brother or sister, whether that's government, the rest of the family, your parents tell you. Why are we so afraid to let time dictate? Let time be our teacher, to teach us what we need to learn to graduate. Why do we feel like we have to jump there or run there?
But I also
Time's telling us to
think,
walk.
yeah, but when I think about risk, you know, I've reached points in my life where it was riskier to not take a risk. Um, by not choosing something and just accepting the status quo or your position, that might be ultimately be riskier than actually taking the risk to do something different. You just might not see it that way because it feels comfortable. We talk about getting outside of comfort zones a lot. It's probably tied into that. But, if you consume and you get all the things that you want or believe you want, is that enough? What else is out there? What are the things that, because you didn't take a risk, what exponential opportunity didn't happen because you're afraid of a risk? The risk may be the fact that you're not willing to take a risk.
Yeah, and I think that perfectly explains it. I think sometimes we do just have to just take that chance. I mean, I think that's for me, that's always my bottom line reasoning for always taking a chance. Is just my biggest fear is wondering what if. When my time, when it's my time, I'm when I get old, when I get older and I've done all, lived my life and everything, and I'm starting to go on the wind down. My biggest fear is looking back and being like, dang, what if I would have just took that chance or would have just did that?
What did I miss, right? I
Exactly.
mean, did I take advantage of everything that was there for me to take advantage of? It doesn't mean that you don't, take care of your family, the necessities in our lives. I mean, you still have obligations and things you need to do, but you also got to be open to, that feeling of insecurity that comes with putting yourself out there, because that's how you're going to validate something and find something innovative that will change your life.
And I think circling back, that's to the topic of this discussion, taking that risk. And if it goes wrong or if it fails, or fearing what if and just sitting there maybe or going back and forth or you thinking it's too late, it goes back to the question, the topic of this discussion right now. Why is it important to find your why? Because we're not doing this because you're not doing this because it's successful. I mean, to be successful, that's one of the perks, I believe, to make money, be successful. Yes, that's definitely one of the perks.
Use
But
fuel.
fuel, yes. But when we're talking about actually doing the thing, we're actually going out and doing what's on your why statement, it's
Mhm.
because that's a part of you that you wish to express and share with the world that you're
Yeah,
passionate about. That is a part of you, a very delicate and sensitive part that you're trying to share with the world. And I think that's why we focus so much on immediate and media gratification, social comparison, and perfection. That is a very delicate part that we're trying to give out to the world. It's like a baby, like if somebody, if I had a baby, I wouldn't give that to the world because that's a part of me. That's the most
right.
valuable part of me. So when we're talking about leaving our piece or contributing our piece or whatever you want to call it to the world, is sometimes we have to realize the reason why we're doing it. Like me, I put out my piece, my ideas, and what I'm passionate about to inspire others, and hopefully inspire them to create something that inspires other people. That infinite circle. That is the reason why I do it. So if this podcast only gets 50 views, then hey, that's 50 people. I have to remember that's
Exactly.
50 people that I inspired to do something, to create, to do something. I may have wanted 5 million, but I still reached that why state. It may not have been the end result, but that is why I did it. I still completed my why statement. I still completed my moral mission that I gave myself. So I think that's when it comes to taking risk and letting time be our teacher. That we have to realize, go back to that why statement. This is why we're doing this. This is like you say, it gives a clear piece. It may not define everything, but it's that starting point that we need, or one of the starting points that we need to sit there and be like, this is why I'm doing it. So when whether we reach failure or success, we don't stop. We keep
Right.
going.
Exactly. This is great.
So if any of you guys are actually interested in finding your why statement, Joe actually hosts seminars that he hosts to help you find your why statement. It's a great interactive group. It's a great interactive group that you'll be a part of. You interact with most of the members, participating members. You discuss your values and what you're passionate about. And you will walk away with a very powerful sentence that can inspire you to do great things or inspire you to work on that why statement. Joel, do you have any contact information or anything people can kind of reach out to you to try to get if people are interested in these seminars?
Yeah, I have a side business that I run these seminars under. It's called C Context. And the best way to reach me would be to email me at ccontext, SEECONTEXT, at gmail.com. So just email me there and we can set up some time to talk. And I can let you know when the next seminar is coming up, and get you included in things. Because I just really think there's opportunity for all of us to become maybe something we don't see yet. And we always got to be looking to the horizon to figure out what we can become.
And those of you who are interested in seeing or volunteering or anything that you want to learn about the Delta Project, we covered that in the beginning of this
Well,
conversation as well. So if you are interested in that, I know that Delta Project is on Facebook and they have their own website. Is there any else information that you want to tell people?
yeah. So the website for the Delta Project is thedeltaproject.co. It's not com, it's .co. So if you just type in https thedeltaproject.co, you'll find our website. And that'll be a good starting point to understand the work that we do, and kind of where we're headed. Um, yeah, I mean, it's exciting work and it's meaningful work, and it's what gets me up in the morning every day.
And hopefully, when you join the Y seminar at C Context or C the stuff on the amazing content on the Delta Project, you can find something that wakes you up every day, because that's the goal of TSA, the story of the struggling artist, to find what made that fuel so you can create your masterpiece to share with the world. That's why this first episode was finding your why. Because when you're on the road to create your masterpiece is going to be difficult. You're gonna fall, you're gonna fail, you're gonna go in so many circles your head might spin. But the thing that you have to remember is the reason why you're doing this. This is you. This is your mark that you're leaving on the world. And if you're trying to become something that you can't see, that means other people won't see it either. Or some people won't be able to see it either. So sometimes you have to constantly remind yourself to push yourself, especially as an artist. Because I believe there's an art to everything, art to business, art to speaking, and everything. But as an artist, artists receive so much critique from their work, from other people that didn't even have an input into the work. And as contradictory as that is, it's a very empowering influence on artists and the people who consume art. So finding your why is the most important, I would say, is one of the most important steps before getting started. So there's going to be plenty of more content diving into this. Joel, I would love to have you back so we can get deeper into this.
I'd love that too.
But this is the first, the first conversation, because I wanted to set the tone for the story of the struggling artist. There's definitely more content to come. There's music on the side, videos and everything like that that's going to be coming. If you like this, go ahead and subscribe. And you can follow me on Instagram, Untitled_Flow. That is UNTITLED Flow. So I appreciate you, Joe, for coming along with us today
Appreciate
and
you.
having this great conversation to inspire others to try to find their why. And make sure you guys check out that C context to get started on your plans and everything.